Hey everyone, what's up? This is Simon from DevTactic. Today we will have a slightly different topic than usual, so not completely Ionic because this is the first part of a two-part series on JSON Web Token authorization for Ionic apps. And in this first part we will build a Node.js server connected to a MongoDB database with a very simple user object where users can create an account, log in, and then get a token back. And in the second part, we will then implement the Ionic app. So this is a different video which uses the JSON Web Tokens from our own server. If you have a bit of knowledge about JavaScript, you should feel right at home with Node.js. And it's actually super simple to build a server, so let's do this. I've created a blank new folder in this case, so nothing in here by now. And let's simply run npm init to create a new npm package.json file. And if you specify -y, you're not asked any questions. So let's keep this for now, and we need to install a few dependencies. So you can find, of course, like always, the related article below this video. What we need is Express, which will actually start a server, the body parser to easily get the body of our post messages, JSON Web Token to create a new token, and passport JSON Web Token for the actual authentication part, Mongoose, the connection to our database, and bcrypt to store the password of a user in a more safe way. If you want, you can also add something like this, start, and then call node server.js. So this is where our entry point for the application will be. So you can also change this for main. Otherwise, I would also, let me see if I can bring it in, recommend that you install nodemon. Simply install it globally, and then you can run nodemon in the file of your app, and this will get you some nice live reload for your application. So nodemon, really great tool. Okay, we've installed the package.json dependencies, and now our app needs a few more folders and files. So just for this video, let's put everything into source. You can also have one more file the top level, or you can call this folder app, whatever. So then we have a new folder, config, controller. We need some middleware. We will talk about what this is later. And we got the models. Perhaps I should use the plural everywhere. I'm not sure. Anyway, then we need a server.js. We need a routes.js, and now we also need the config.js. Just a few more. We're pretty soon done. We need the user controller.js. We need the passport.js, and finally we need the user.js. So for now, I would recommend just create this structure. We will fill all of those files pretty soon with some live. The package.json can be saved. You see all the dependencies are installed, and we actually don't need anything more from this file right now. Perhaps we will simply start with our configuration. I will bring some of the parts of this video in because it's actually a lot of code. This file is used for some configuration files, as you might see from the name. So we need a token, a secret to sign our token. This can be whatever you want, perhaps something safe. And then we also need the path to our database. In my case, I'm using a local MongoDB. Of course, make sure that you have MongoDB installed on your machine. It's pretty easy on a Mac with Brew. On Windows, I'm not completely sure how easy it is, but I'm pretty sure it's also easy. So make sure the database is running. You don't have to create it upfront. It will be created once we start our app. Let's also run quickly over the user object. So the MongoDB is a database that we're using just like you've used SQL databases, perhaps. It's a NoSQL database, so things are a bit different. And with the Mongoose wrapper that we've installed, we have actually access to the database by creating schemes and we can use to store and get files from the database, or documents as it's called with this type of database. So our user schema looks like this: email and password, very tricky, and a bit of configuration for both of them. So string, of course, unique email, or some of the credentials, of course, should be unique, required, true. This will make it automatically lowercase and trim all the blank spaces in it. Perhaps we could add trim to the password as well. Okay, so we got this user schema, and now we can export this schema as user and import it in other files, so we can easily work with what we've created here. To store a password inside the database, it is not recommended to store it as a plain text password, so don't do this ever. What we're gonna do is we add a new function that will be called before the object is saved to the database. And this is done by adding the pre-save to this schema. And then we run a function where we check if the password was modified. If it's not modified, then we can simply return next, which basically calls the next action in the stack or queue of events. If it is modified, we use our bcrypt to generate a salt that is used to hash the actual password. And then finally, we can set the password to this new hash and finish the operation. So by doing this, we make sure that no password is ever stored in clear text in the database, and that's very important for your applications, of course. All right. Finally, we need one more function. So if the user then logs in later on, we have to compare the passwords. And of course, we need a safe way to do this, and we can do it with bcrypt again. So in that case, we have a candidate password, which is the password in clear text that the user has submitted to the server, and then the actual password that's already hashed for the user. So bcrypt can safely compare this and return if there's a match or not. All right, so that is the user, and this is also how you can create multiple objects. So if you want to build, based on this tutorial, a little to-do application or something, simply create a new to-do model and then interact with the values from that model. Okay, the passport middleware. We want to secure parts of the API using the JSON Web Token. So for this authentication method, the client, which will be our Ionic app, will send a header field with the token to the server. The server then needs to handle this token, get it from the header, see if it's still valid, if the user is actually a real user, if the information inside the token is valid. And all of this will be handled by Passport and the Passport JSON Web Token package. And I will just bring this in because it's more or less the recommended stuff from Passport. What we need in here is to create a new strategy that we will later pass to our application. And this will simply use the payload of our JSON Web Token, and in it we will have the user ID. So then we use the user object that we've created in the models before to find it. And if we find a user, we will return the user. We will return the user. In all the other cases, we will have an error or something. So that's our middleware that we will add to our application, and this will simply run when a new request is recognized and we've added the middleware to those requests. All right, middleware in place, perfect. Now let's continue with the actual routes, and perhaps I will do some typing for now as well. So let's import a few of things, and then we export register register user, request result or response, and there we go. So to register a user, we first of all check if the body contains the email and password that we need to create a new user object. Then we go ahead and call find one on our user model. To find our user, we will then use the email that was inside the body of our request. So again, request body email, because we of course have to check if the user already exists. And in that case, we will get back an error or a user object. And well, let's do some error handling. If we encounter an error, we send that back. If the user already exists, we send an error back. But if it's actually a new user, we can go ahead and simply use our user model and pass in the body, because we know what we're gonna send in the body. So the user, interesting construct for new user, can then be simply saved back to the database. And this will be done by using save from Mongoose. And let's finish this. If we encounter again an error, send it back, and otherwise we will send our new created user back. So that's the register function. We create it from the email and password. We save the model, which will save it to the database. And while we're saving it, the pre-function will run to hash the password, so no password is stored to the database in clear text. All right, that's the register function. We will connect those functions to the appropriate routes later. Let's just do the second one as well. So if we got register, we of course also need the login user functionality. Again, we need to send both of these. We go ahead and look up the email. We can keep the same things actually, but in this case, if we don't find the user, then the user does not exist. And then of course, we're not gonna create a new user, but we use the user we find and call the compare password function. Remember, that's the one we defined right here as a method for our user schema. So user compare password request body password, and then we hopefully get back is match true, which means the user passwords do match. And in that case, if is match and also no error, that's the success case. The error case is simply like before, returning something hasn't worked out. What's wrong with my, come on. Okay, well, it's okay. Okay, so the success case means the user was logged in successfully, and in that case we return something back, of course with a status 200 if we want to, and a new object which will contain our actual token. And of course you don't want to pass back a simple random string. A JSON Web Token is a real token that we have to create, and therefore let's use a function create token for our user. And this create token function could be at the top, or you could create a new helper file for it, of course, as well. And inside here we will return using the JSON Web Token package sign, which expects a payload and a secret or private key and some options. So let's go ahead, and the information we're gonna include in that JSON Web Token is first of all the user ID, and then if you want to something like user email. In the first tutorial I created on this topic a few years ago, I also had the password in here, which is definitely not recommended. So people could decode the JSON Web Token. So don't keep any sensitive data in here, but the user ID and the user email are nothing that you really need to protect. So that's something you can definitely include in the token. All right. We need the secret to sign the token, and of course this comes from our own config object that we've imported and created in the beginning. And finally, you can also add expires in. A nice code completion here. So let's make this pretty short. I'm actually not sure if it is seconds or in seconds. Perfect. So let's use 20 seconds, which means the token will be valid a very short time. All right, we create a token with this information, we sign it, and it expires, and we have used it in the right place, which means the user login was successful, and then we create the token and return it to the user. Okay, perfect. I think we're pretty close to finishing this, so let's close this. And actually, I think we're in the wrong file here. Of course, all of these are the user functions, and those functions need to go to the user controller. So the routes is only for creating the real routing setup. And in the routes, we then import the user controller, which is assigned to some of the routes. All right. The cool thing, since I think Express 4, is that we can easily get an instance of the router in all the files and then apply the routes that we want to create. So let's say routes, what's that? Come on, routes slash, of course, routes.get. So this means if we access the simple base path for these routes, we have the request and the response again, and we simply return whatever. Hello, this is the API. And perhaps you want to see something on screen, so let's move over to the server for a second. Yeah, let's move on to the server. And let's add a bunch of imports again. So this is pretty much everything we installed. And what we do is create our new app by calling express, and then tell the app to use the body parser, which is, as I said in the beginning, needed to get the body of our post requests in a nice way. And let's leave out a few of the things for now, and let's see if we can actually get this thing up and running. So you've seen that I've used the arrow syntax, or you can use it like this. It's just different about the context and using this. So if I use this in here, it is different than if I had the arrow, in which case this would be everything around it. So that's stuff for another video. But let's simply return rest send hello. The API is at http localhost port plus API, because this is actually the first file that is started inside our server. And if we define a route here like this, this means we will access it at localhost 5000, of course. And we will keep the other routes that are related to our API under a different domain. That's just something I would like to show you. So that gives the complete server a bit more structure. It's not mandatory in this case, but let's import the routes from our other file, which are in routes.js. Okay, and then tell the app to use these routes, but please only under /API. So that's the trick in here. Now we will see the different very soon. Let's leave out the Mongoose connection for now and tell the app to listen on this port, and finally add a little log so we know the app is up and running. I think for the routes we also need module exports routes. Okay, and let's try this out the very first time. So you could also run nodemon if you have installed it, or you could run node start. No, of course, npm start, which will start our file once. It's always a good idea to check for errors like this, which made it impossible for our application to work. So now I will also use nodemon, so I get the nice live reload. Okay, let's start it and let's see. So restarting, and there we see our log. The app seems to be running at localhost. So for testing APIs, I always recommend using Postman, which is pretty awesome. So let's make a little GET request, and there it is. Here is our API, or more or less here's our server, because the API is now available under /API. And there we see we get the second log, which comes from here, which might look like it is still under the top level, but because we've told the app to use it under /API, all the routes inside that file will be under /API. And now we can also add the other routes that we've created. So routes post to register, which will use then the user controller register user, and simply finish it. So instead of using it like this with a function, we simply pass in the register user function that we've created up front here. It's more or less the same, just a bit different syntax. And in this case, of course, for login, we use the login, and we actually haven't used any authentication for a route yet. So let's add finally another route to get something special. Normally you would have the authentication on the routes, like where you get the to-dos of the user or the information of the user, everything that's related to a logged in user. And what we do here is now simply pass in the middleware, and we can use the passport authenticate middleware here. We only have to pass the JSON web token string here, and then passport will know which strategy to use. Of course, our JSON web token strategy. And also, I think we have to pass in session false if you're using standard JSON web token authentication. And then again, what we've seen before, return whatever you like. And the cool thing is actually that once you add this to a route, in here inside the request object, the user will be added. So let's use some of the information from the user. So let's say, hey, request user email. So as you see, we simply make a GET request. So there are no parameters, no body passed. This is simply injected from the strategy. So request user email, whatever, I open at the close, something magical in here. Okay, and finish it, close, close, fine. So let's save this and let's go back to Postman and let's make a request to special. API special unknown authentication strategy. Do I have a typo again in here? Please not. Okay. Of course, we should also configure our server. So let's stop the cross jumping between files and let's just finish all of it. The routes are ready so far. We will check them out in a second. But for the server, we still need to tell it to please use passport, and we need to call the initialize function on it as well. And then we need our passport middleware, which is the one we've created in the beginning. So this one should be at middleware passport, and then again on passport we call use just like we call it on the app. Passport is a middleware as well. Use the passport middleware. All right, now the app knows about passport and all of the authentication stuff. The last thing we need to add here is the MongoDB connection, and I'll just bring it in because the video is already pretty long. So connect using our configuration database, and this is to prevent some deprecation errors. And then you can also log out once it is connected or if there's an error. So if you save it now, you should see there will be dragons and MongoDB database connection successfully. So make sure, of course, as I said in the beginning, MongoDB needs to work. Back to Postman. Let's do this again. And now we simply get back a 401 unauthorized for this special route. If we go here, it is not authenticated. So we could do this by simply applying this middleware right here as well. And if we then try to go to this route, it would be unauthorized as well. All right, now let's check the register and login functionality. And also I'll bring in another tool called Robo 3T. It was called Robo Mongo before. A cool tool to inspect your database. And you see my collection is empty. So let's make the, not login, but let's do the register one. Inside the body, perhaps we remove this value. And API register, oh great, in JSON. Yeah, because the JSON wasn't valid. But now you see you need to send email and password, so that seems to work. Let's send both of it. And then the user was created with the ID, email, and the hashed password. Perhaps we could also return or remove the actual password, but for now, let's keep it like it is. And if we refresh the database, we also see the object was added, email, ID, and password to the MongoDB. So that's the magic of registering a user and saving it to the database actually. Now let's log in this user. And there we go, log in, same credentials, or let's use wrong credentials. Okay, it's not working. Right credentials, and we get back the token. And now we need to be we need to hurry up a little bit because for the special route, still unauthorized. But if you add it as an authorization header with that, actually, where are we? We're on the wrong tab, and I'm pretty sure it will be gone very soon. Yeah, of course, it's already invalid. So let's get a new token and let's be a bit faster. And then we see we get the message. So why do we get this message? We've added the JSON web token with Bira in front, which is just the standard way from JSON web token where we extract it. This could also be in a different place, but we've told it from auth header as Bira token, which is pretty much the standard for it. So you see our Ionic app will then have to take care to set this header on all the further requests to get the information from the server. So if I do it again, the token is already expired. We could now set the time a bit up. I'm not sure where we had it. I think here, whatever, do perhaps a day, or I think this should be a day, 24 hours. But of course, for testing it out, it's quite nice to set it to a small amount of time. So we can then also use it in our Ionic app and perhaps automatically log out the user. All right, I think we covered everything. That's how to build a simple Node.js server with a little API where users can sign up, where users can log in and retrieve some information that is protected with JSON Web Token authentication. In the second part of this video, we will then build the Ionic application, which needs to go through all of these steps. Of course, we need to register, we need to log in, and finally, we want to make an authorized request to the API. This light is pretty annoying and we should stop the video now before I get angry. So thanks again for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and also check out the ionicacademy.com where we talk about stuff like this and especially more Ionic topics, so you can learn Ionic in the best and fastest possible way. I'll see you there and inside the next video. Have a great day and take care.